Alrighty, guys. Good afternoon. Um, this will be the third video of this series and should finish the 22X4 2.0 build off. But again, these are really kind of meant to build along with. But if you guys end up on here, have any questions or whatnot, always feel free to put a question up as far as a comment goes, and I will try to get those answered. And other than that, I'm just going to jump right into this. Today we're doing bags H, I, and J, which is essentially the rear end of the car. And then what would normally be the electronics, but I don't have electronics to put into this, so that'll go a little quicker. So hopefully we can bang through this one. Again, anybody that pops in, if you have any questions, just let me know. And we'll get started. Big bag H. Just like I explained at the start of every video, I'm pulling off the header card, that can go in the trash. But from here on out, until I finish an entire bag, I always set all the sub bags off to the side. That way, in case I accidentally left a washer or something in there, I'm not having to dig through the trash, or heaven forbid it fell into the bottom of the trash and then I'll never find it again. That's just, so I'm going to take this, set this right off to the side here. And then the other thing that I've talked about is all these bags have these little white labels on them, and they go in order. So like this says H1. H1 is not necessarily step 1, and then H2 is step 2 of bag H. It just 1 goes before 2, 2 goes before 3, and so on. So one bag might be a couple. It might be step H1 and H2 or something like that. And then the other thing is, this is a bag we kind of prescribed to the sub vendor. They sub bag items based on what they feel they can weigh appropriately. So essentially, whenever you see me open one of these numbered bags, I'm going to open it and also open all the sub bags within it, because there's no order to the sub bags. So that goes that way. And this is going to get cut out. And see, like this one little washer that's kind of off from the side of everything else. You know, let's say I just cut this, I didn't notice it, and I cut it down the middle, and I went and I threw this bag away. Well, now I lose that washer, right? So it's kind of one of those reasons I do what I do. I mean, yeah, you can pay attention, but sometimes we're building these things pretty late at night. And so, yeah, it doesn't hurt. So I'm going to go ahead and lean this down so you guys can kind of see my workspace a little bit better. Hopefully. Let's see here. Yeah, that's about right. So this is going to be step H1. H1 is building up the coupler and insert. This is essentially the output shaft insert, and it kind of has some dots on it there. And see this dot on this side, right? It has a 1 dot on it, which makes it the lowest one it is. So that's what we're going to put in. This is the DC car, and we'll get going here. But yeah, there's 3 different heights, so that you can put the diff at 3 different heights. Big bearing goes in, turn it around, small bearing on the shaft, pin goes in. Now you're going to want to hold this so that the pin stays straight, or flat anyway, so it stays kind of centered. And then this slides in here, and the pin will be captured by the bearing itself, the internal bearing. So slid that in. Now this can fall out, so I'm going to hold that from the back, but now you can see how the pin is kind of captured by that inner bearing. The pinion gear is going to go on, and then this little tiny washer. Oops. Let's go up a tiny bit more. This little tiny washer is a domed washer. You want the dome out, so you want it like this. It's a little lock washer. Right, so we got that in there. And then I would strongly recommend picking up an MIP 5.0, because it's got the nice thin wall, so it fits right into the gear there. turn it upside down. You'll feel it kind of catch. And then I am going to go through a lot of this a little bit faster than probably yesterday, because this technically will be the second time any of you are doing this, because the rear end's just like the front end for the most part. The other thing I did mention last night is right now, this, with the size of this gear, this is built outside the gearbox, and then you slide it in place and 3 little screws go in. If you're using the composite pinion gears, you actually have to build this already pressed into the case, because the OD of the composite gear is bigger, so you can't get to these bottom 2 screws. Anyway, so then this is going to slide in here. This is set so that it's the lowest possible. And we're just going to push that right in place. Okay. And then we're going to put the 3 screws in. Top one in first. And again, I always do these with the hand. I don't use the 1.5 bit in the electric drill device, just because these are fairly short screws, and you know, sometimes you're going to be moving this height around a lot, so you just kind of want to get these snug. These don't have to be uber tight, nothing too crazy. Hopefully everybody's having a good day. Some of you probably started getting your cars already. I know a bunch of team guys got them a little early, but okay, and there's that. So now our pinion gear's in here. It's got a little bit of fore and aft lash. It's not the insert moving, it's just this, and you want that so that this spins properly. And then you can tell this is the rear gearbox. The easiest way to tell is, see this ledge here? It's flat. The front gearbox is at an angle. So just going to mention that here because we talked about it in the other video too. So that is step H1. We're going to get to step H2, which does require us to open the next bag. Again, I'm going to open all the bags at once here in this sub bag. So this one's actually separated into kind of 2 sections. I just cut straight across both sections and dump it all out. This should be 2 shims. Okay, so sometimes they stick together, so you just kind of want to, and then I'm going to sit here and I'm going to separate all my screw types. So flat head end lengths, flat head, button heads. Oops, those can go together. Those go together. And here's another flat head length. It's a little shorter. Those are 10s, those are 12s. 10, 10, and then we got some other things here. And again, just because I do this at the start of every video, the way you measure screws, a flathead, let's not type anything. A flathead screw is measured all the way from the flat to the base of the screw. So more or less like that. And this is a 12 millimeter. A button head screw is measured from the base to the bottom, so just the length essentially of the threads. So, and that's a 12 millimeter. Okay, and then the next one's a 14 millimeter. So have all those separated. Got some 10s, 12s, and some 14s and beyond. So, and then we've got the div holders. You can see there's a 1 dot and a 3 dot here. Right, so that spins both ways. The outer one can go both ways except for the middle. The ones that hold the output shaft, there's 3 separate ones because you got to get those screw holes aligned. But the first thing we have you do, I'm going to grab my rear diff, which I had marked with a 5 because it's the rear, and that all looks good. Just double check, there's no crazy oil. And then it's a shim. A bearing on each side, and the shim, and the bearing. Sometimes it's kind of hard to get it all the way on there. I'm just going to grab my shock tool and use it instead of having to muck up my fingers, and it presses right on. So and I'm going to put my bearing holders on, right? Now this part's important. You don't want to put like one up and one down or something so that your diff's all askew, right? So we're trying to get this to match this. So the diff should be down, right? Which makes the bigger part up top. So the 3 dots should be up and the 1 dot should be down. And then the gearbox, you can see we put this little ledge here. That's so that you can't put the diff in the wrong way. It literally just won't go in. Okay. So this has to go in this way to get all the way back. And then, so I'm going to put this in. I'm going to be checking the sides here, make sure they line up properly. Whoa. Sorry, guys. Okay. Right. So now the diff's in there. So something I want to show you, you can see that this key's in right here. So if it's a little askew, right, you're going to see a big gap. So you just kind of rotate it until it kind of pops right in place. Okay. And then cap goes on. Okay. So now I got that in there. I always just spin it just to make sure we're okay. Tiny bit of play back and forth, as there should be. Now you're going to notice I didn't put grease on the gears, and I showed that in the first video as to why, but I'll talk about it too when I go to grease them. So I didn't put grease on the gears mainly because this is open. So if I grease this before I put it in and I'm still messing around with it and tightening stuff, there's a chance I'm going to grab it like this and then get grease all over my hands. So since the bottom's open, I'm going to grease it as I put it onto the chassis. So now I'm going to grab screws and tighten those. And this is 4 M12s, button heads. So I'm going to grab those. I'm going to grab my Hitachi. It's on 5. 2 tops in. And then I'm going to put the 2 bottoms in. And there's 6 holes in the bottom here. These, the screw doesn't go into because that's what they actually thread into. That's what's going to hold this to the chassis. But these, you'll see the screw drops right in there, right? So it's going through this to grab just the cover. So put those in. Get my cat here. There's a lot of cats. Okay. Now it still spins just fine. And again, the composite ring and pinion from the 1.0 and the composite internal gears from the 1.0 all work in the 2.0. So no problem there. That's step H2. So this happens to be a bag. I opened bag H2 and I did step H2, but I'm also going to do step H3 with this same sub bag, right? So that's going to mean that H4 will actually be a bag that's marked H3. So just to kind of show you. So what it's having me do is I'm going to put the C-mount on. That goes on the side with the pinion, which would be the forward side. Okay. So, and it takes the 12mm screws. And I just get that started so I can get the other side lined up. This makes it so screws go in straighter. And I'm going to go back. These screws, this is an important part, so I'm just going to make sure these are nice and snug. Okay, so that's good. Got my C-mount in place. Anyone know if the Hitachi screw gun has more slip, less torque than the Milwaukee one? I feel like the Milwaukee one is way too strong for RC stuff. I have had a hard time with the Milwaukee one. I know that Don V uses the Milwaukee one because he's a big Milwaukee guy, which is totally cool. And he has to have the torque down pretty low. Like 5 on this is definitely not 5 on his, if that's what you're asking. It's I don't know that he usually uses past about 2, maybe 3 sometimes on 8 scale stuff. So there's that. So then the next step is actually putting the gearbox onto the chassis. So I'm going to go ahead and grease the gears now. So I'm just going to get my white grease out. This is a white lithium grease is what I prefer to use. So that's what I like to use. The black grease works fine, guys. It's just that it's a little bit more sticky. So it's not, I run spec, so I like things to be a little bit freer. And you don't have to go all the way around because as it spins around, it's going to get it on the pinion gear naturally anyway. And that's going to kind of disperse it properly. So I went ahead and wiped it off on my blue towel over here. Close this up so I don't dip stuff into it. But it's just this, it's just a little tub off of Amazon, this Lucas white lithium grease. And these big, huge things, they're like $5 or $7 for one or two of them. So, and then I'm going to go ahead and just rotate this around, and you're going to see it's going to spread it to all the rest of the gears, right? And it's still spinning like nearly as free as if I had no grease, which is kind of what I'm going for since I run spec. And I got a little crazy with the grease in there, but such is life. Okay, so now I got the gearbox in place, right? I'm going to go ahead and put my center drive shaft in. Now, again, I always make sure I put my bones so that the laser etching is towards the center diff. I've always done that in all four-wheel drive cars. That way, in case I move stuff around and I take this bone, I put a different length bone in because I changed the chassis or whatnot. When I put this bone in the next time, it's properly going the right way because these do wear in a certain way. So now I'm going to put the 4 screws in the bottom. Okay, that one's probably a little further than I'd normally drag it, but I'll show you here. Oops, not exactly being able to see, but this is pretty self-explanatory. I'm just putting the 4 screws in. And then I'm going to go back and re-snug this one. All 4 of these. Because again, on 5, this thing's not going to drive these all the way in, which is fine to me. It's a brand new car. I don't want to risk stripping anything out. I want to make the threads proper. But now you can see that I've got those 4 screws in. You can still get access to the 2 button heads through the bottom. So those 2, and then these 2, and the cap comes off, your diff can come out, and everything can stay on the chassis. But you can see everything's spinning nice and freely. And then we're going to put the top 2 screws in. They go in right here, which are the longer button head screws. Check these, make sure they're good. Yep, good. Good. All right. Now we have a rear gearbox, which is nice. So now we're going to go on to H4, which is going to be bag H3. Again, it's just the next bag in the number sequence. Pour all those out. Pour those out. All the plastic bags over here in this stack. So now I got all my stuff. There's 2 rear setups. One's a body post, one's just flat. We're going to put the flat one on. The body post doesn't actually hit the new body. Never was set up for the Proline body, so I'm going to throw that back in the box there. And I always set it up, the tower's marked with standard. I'm going to set that up to be like towards the inside of the car. So when it's mounted, it'll go like this. So you'll see standard on the inside, just like I did on the front. You see the -2 there. So, yeah. So we're gonna can't even see all these. Anyway, I'm gonna organize my screws really quick so that I don't have to worry about it after the fact. All right. Well, that's the first I've heard of that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this put together. So in this case, the standard marking is going to be towards the front, and then I'm going to put the long screws through the tower. They go into the middle hole. Okay. Well, let me take those right back out because these actually slide over the corners. These are just to protect the rear tower. So these slide on first, like so. Okay. And this is the front of the tower, so when you hit, it's like this. So then now the screws go through. I got ahead of myself. On dirt, technically you don't have to run these, but I don't know. My dirt car, I've kind of put even the AC front caps on now on the protector just because. I'm going to grab a 7mm wrench, tighten these. Okay. Now I've got them both on. Those are my shock mounts. And then we're going to go ahead and put the ball studs in place already. And these, so the screws came in, the ball stud's going to the shank's going to come in from the same side the screw came in, even though the ball stud's technically facing the other way. Okay. So it's going to be like that. And we're going to put the two nuts on. And these are the same ball studs as the 22X. So there's the newer 5.8mm ball studs for a considerable amount more articulation before any issues. So that goes on. Okay. There's all that. And then the other thing that's going to go on is I usually put this on right now. So this goes towards the front. So this oval shape keys with this. And even though the body doesn't get down to these, you kind of want to put them on because they're good protection. From if you get landed on top of and the body gets pushed down, at least it has somewhere to kind of stop and bounce back off of. Now this is going in, this is a little bit softer plastic. So I'm actually going to turn this down to 2 and then go. Okay, that's not enough. All right, so 3 was enough. And then I'll finish it off with the old hand screwdriver. Okay. All right, so there's that. Okay, and now I've got the tower mount in the tower. So now we're going to put the tower onto the car like so. Okay. There's essentially, whoops. Wow. Yeah, I really am looking it up today, guys. I'm sorry. Let me take the screw back out of here. Okay, because it's actually meant to go like this. So I'm just going to get that started. And then the 2 longer screws go up front through the mount as well. I'm going to get that one started, and then I will get this top one over here started. And we're going to go on 4. Okay. So the 2 outer ones, you can tighten quite a bit more than the middle one, but that was essentially the 2 longer ones through here, the shorter one through here. The two longer ones go into the gearbox, right? And then the shorter one goes into that. Now I can put the other two shorter ones, those go to the bottom of the tower that's just straight through. Turn that up 1 to 5. I'm going to check these as well. I want to show you which ones those were. Okay. And then those were those two screws right there. Okay. Those are the shorter ones. Again, guys, if you're watching, this is kind of meant to watch along, you know, watch as you build type of thing. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. But I'm going to go ahead and keep going. Get onto the next bag here. Okay. And again, set these off to the side. And then these aren't quite the same as the front arms, but most of the time you can get them off pretty clean. If not, kind of, okay, yep, see what happened there and there. So one came off clean, one didn't. So this I have to cut off of here. I'm just going to use some, these are nice and flat on one side. They're called sprue cutters. I'm just going to cut those off of there, and it makes it pretty good. You can use an X-Acto knife or whatnot and clean that up a little bit more if you want. Just for sake of expediency. Now, I've had a couple people message me about this, so I'm just going to bring this up right now. Again, this is just a sub bag. All of this, all these extra screws can go away. This, I'm going to cut this entire thing open at once and dump it all out. Okay, but what people notice is, so the D happens to be packaged with these pills, and these pills are the 0.5 up pills. The 0.5 up pills actually go with the C block, and then the pills that are over here actually go with the D block, and they're like, oh, they're packaged wrong. Well, no. This isn't meant to be open top, open bottom. This is meant to be opened and dumped out. Okay? But just so you know, and then I will separate the pills though. So now 0.5 middle up, center dots. I got my arm side mounts, and I got some little 0.5 shims. All right, so now I'm going to put the lower shock mount in place already, and there's one side that's broached. I don't know if you can see that. What that means is you can fit your 1.5 into it, and it's the side that has the essentially the shank end. And then this is going to go in the inside hole. So and that's on 5. Okay, so now it looks like that. I'm going to do the other side now. Okay. So now I got both those set. And these are the same rear arm as the 1.0. The rear arms are the same. So if you still have some of those, they work fine as spare parts. And now I'm going to put the arms in place. So right and left, and they're marked. See the R, 75. We also use these on the 2-wheel drive now. So the manual shows that the C block is the 0.5. Okay. 0.5 with the dot to the top. Man, that's really hard to see. There it is. 0.5 with the dot to the top. So that goes in this way, dot up. The 0.5 tells you how far it is off center, right? So it's 0.5 pill off center. And the center dot means it's centered. It's not in the corner or anything like that. So put those in there. I'm going to go ahead then and I'm going to slide the hinge pins into the arms. And then I'm going to push essentially the hinge pins into the front pills. Push those to the front. They don't have to go in all the way, guys. This, when you put this on, it's going to get that all situated. So then it has me put the 2.5 shims. So one on each side. I'm going to put the pills in the block. Now this pill is just one dot in the center. Okay. That just means you can put it in any way you want. So you just push it in there real good. And now this goes, obviously, so D is up. And then we pushed that on, right? Now I'm going to put the 2 screws in. Oh, we're doing great on time tonight. The rear end's much easier than the front end. And I'm going to get one side started. I'll run the other side in. And then I will finish by hand. And these get fully tightened. And your arms should be nice and flappy free, guys. So if they're not, then usually means you didn't get your pills in all the way. While I'm thinking about it, I'm gonna flip this around so I don't dip the front of the car in white grease. And then I'm going to turn the page, and now we're on bag I. Okay, the bag I continues the rear end. So now I'm going to take all of my all my bags from the last bag set. And those can now all go in the trash. So I can start the next stack. Header card in the trash. And here we go. Those all out. Look for bag 1, 3, 2, 1. Oh, sway bars. Good time. I talked about this in the last video, but we'll go ahead and get it talked about here. The sway bars between the 1.0 and 2.0, they were a running change part number, which means we shouldn't have done it that way. That was something I did, and I thought it would turn out okay, and it did not. So that's on me. So I'll just own up for that right now. The sway bars changed because the bend had to get further out. So the bend's further out. The 1.0s were like in here. We had to do that to make room for these collars. And so as soon as the sway bar part number is back in stock at Horizon, it will be the updated revised ones. But that's the only way I'd buy a pack of sway bars right now if it were me. In the interim, that won't be until probably at the earliest the end of March. In the meantime, we found that the B84 sway bars have a wider bend like this. They kind of bend, but then they go out a little bit more, so you got to kind of tuck them in a tiny bit. But they work just as well. I'm just putting all the set screws into so I put them into the collars and into the sway bar ends just to have it over with. But the way that this works is essentially you've got this opening here and you've got all these little bushings, and the bushing fits right in there. The sway bar goes through it, and that is what sets your your gap. But the sway bar, in this case, it's a 1.2 sway bar, which means we put in the 1.4. These have markings on them, and all the extras are in the tuning parts bag, which I'll make mention of those at the end. But you can adjust how you want to use this. So you could essentially put the 1.2 one of these on, which is the same as the bar, and then the bar is going to be tight in there. I'm not sure why you'd ever want to run it that way. If you don't like the looseness of the bar going between the 1.2 and the 1.4, you could always take a 1.2 and drill it out with a 1.3 and use that. Kind of your choice as to how you do this, but you're just going to need to figure out how to mark the stuff. So the bar is going to go through here, and then you're going to feed a bushing like this with the smaller portion in onto the bar. And that's one side. And then that's the other side. And then one collar. Okay, and I'm going to kind of tighten this up a tiny bit. Okay, so now I'm going to center this. And so, and it doesn't have to be super tight, but I usually center the bar using the laser etching. So I use the laser etching, and there's a little injection point, which is centered. And then put the other side on. And again, you're not wanting this to be, you want to make sure this moves around pretty decent. Right, so see how that's nice and free moving. It's got just a tiny bit, just a very, very little bit of back and forth, but it's nice and free. That's what you're going for, guys. And then I'll put the sway bar balls on these. I'll show you in a second. Just want to make sure the set screws facing straight up, but the ball goes on where the bar is right at the end of the ball. And you'll see when you go to put the link on, it makes it so that it all just goes right together. And again, the reason you want to make sure the set screws like straight up and down, or at least in the same spot left and right, is because the holes say this big and the sway bar is here. So when you're tightening the set screw, you know, it can go however, so it makes the ball kind of higher and lower. So it's really important you get the set screw in the same spot. And then I'm going to turn this over to put the sway bar links on. And you can see on this, let's see if I can show it. There's one side that looks like around this hole is what we're looking at. Looks like darn near perfect. And there's one side that you can see kind of a shininess or an inner ridge to. The inner ridge I'm going to put towards the composite ball. And I always do the composite ball first because composite, depending on when they manufacture it, it can kind of shrink and not shrink and all kinds of stuff. So that went on, and it's not, see how it doesn't like move super free? It's pretty free, but I like it to flop around. So I'm just going to take my pliers and I'm going to gently squeeze right in the middle. I didn't get enough. It was too gently. Yeah. So now you can see it moves around pretty good. So then I'm going to do the other side. Okay. Same with this. Okay. Pretty free. Flip it over. It fell. Let's go back around. Now this can clip on the ball. Yeah, it flops up and down, no problem. That's what you want to make sure is the case. You always check one side before you put the second side on. Now, see the whole thing moves up and down nice and free? That's what you're going after, guys. All right. So on to the next bag, which is step I2, which is the rear hubs. And it's bag I2. Okay. And the rear of the car is, it's the same as the 1.0 because the rear end of the car was always really good. The main change was obviously just that we changed the gearbox, which entailed other changes. So we have this with 0.4 inserts. There they are, 0, 4. You're going to put it so that essentially the 4 is upside down. Oh, sorry. So that the 4, basically, the best way to explain this is you're going to put it so the hole's to the top in this car. All right. Because depending on whether you flip it this way or this way, it can be upside down or not. So I'm not going to say right side up or upside down. I'm just going to say hold to the top like so. Okay, and then you got all this stuff here. You got ball stud washers. So one thing I want to mention is the manual says to put a 2mm ball stud washer before you put it into this. Some people have noticed that the ball cup rubs a tiny bit. If that bothers you, I'd swap this out for a 1mm ball stud washer to put into here. So just so you know. And then I've got the screws. And then basically the way these build up is this part gets screwed in place on here, and then the ball stud goes in here. That way you can move this in and out, and then the ball stud can go up and down. And then you've got the 3 different holes you can put it in. So first things first is this is built with the outside is the smaller bearing pocket. The inside is the much larger bearing pocket, just so you know how to tell the inside versus the outside. So from the outside, I always put the 2 screws in place. The way we're building this is we're going to have the 1mm shims between this to shim essentially that plate in some. So I take it and I put 1 washer on to get started. And then this doesn't matter which way I do the first one. It just matters that I do the second one the opposite way, if that makes sense. And I'll show you when we get there. I'm just going to get that screw started, right? So now that's on there, and now that washer's trapped, more or less. Okay. So let me push that in all the way. Put this. So now I can flip this up, put this washer on, flip it back down, and then get this screw going. And now I'm just going to not tighten, but I'm going to get both of those in all the way. Now I can tighten them and snug them. So you're going to see essentially the way this is built. You've got the composite, an aluminum washer, and then this. And again, that's so you can space them in and out to fine tune. Now, what you'll notice is this one was built this way, right? So this is going to be the other side, right? So this is the outside. This is the outside. So now I'm going to put this one on this way so that it mirrors that one, right? So I'm going to flip it around because I'm right-handed. I'm going to get the screw through here, get that 1mm washer on there, and start that screw, and then pull it out, put the screw in. And as you get used to doing this, it'll get easier and easier, guys. The first time I put these together, I'm like, well, this is interesting. Mainly because I just kept dropping the washers. But we don't always run the washers. So the nice thing is that it is adjustable. So you can move this. This is for fine tuning, and then you can go between the ball stud holes for like a bigger jump at once. Okay. So there's that. And then the ball studs, put that on, and the ball studs go in what would be the middle hole. Okay. I just kind of, I always get these started by hand. Way I'm not cross-threading anything. Now, the one thing I will say is if you go to a smaller washer, you're probably going to need a shorter ball stud so that you don't run the ball stud into the hub. So there's that. So there's, and you can see they're mirrored, right? Outside, but the diamond or triangle goes the same way. So now we're on bag 3. And again, just going to cut all this open. And this, the rear end, just like our 2-wheel and like we've had for a long time, has variable axle positions. So you're going to see that this hole moves to the outside. So you have 4 different positions you can put it in, and then the 4-wheel drive axle says 4 on it, right? So I know that this is 4-wheel drive. Take and separate everything. These 4 pins are the same, so you don't need to worry about those. I'm going to actually start the screws into these hexes just so that I don't have to try to put it in after the fact. It's another way of doing it. I did it different on the front end, so I'm trying to do things a little different so you can kind of see. But let me grab my black grease. And again, gonna just get a little bit out of there, a little tiny bit, scrape it off, and then use the tip of it to get it all over the place. Doesn't have to be a ton. It's just enough to kind of coat that a little bit. And again, most of it, if you have excess, it's going to come right out anyway. So that's all I grease the CVA. And then I put the barrel in so the hole's straight up. Okay, and then I wipe off the backside, a little bit of extra grease. And then I'm going to take this and put this in place. And we show that this is going to be the furthest hole in here, or essentially this axle is going to be the furthest out. Okay, so however you want to think about that, that's how that's going to be. Okay, and then we're going to get that in there. I'm going to kind of hold this so that that pin stays in place, and I'm going to set it down so the pin's upright. And then I'm going to build the other one. Again, barrel goes in. Wipe. Let's see, this one I got a little bit more grease. Wipe that off. And you want to make sure you get these the same on both sides. So the furthest pin, if it were on the car, it'd be the furthest hole inward. So you're essentially lengthening everything as much as possible. And then I kind of wiggle it back and forth until all the different holes align. Set that one down. And now put the bigger bearing on the inside, pretty big bearing, smaller bearing on the outside. Still a pretty big bearing, but you can see this hole's much bigger than that one. Do that on both of these. Okay, and then I'm going to take and hold this taut, and this is just going to slide right in from the inside out. Put it so that the hole's horizontal, kind of hanging out there, and then throw the wheel hex on there and hold it like so. And then I'm going to tighten this. And again, guys, this screw doesn't have to be manhandled. It's just to hold this hex so that it doesn't slide off when you take the tire off. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And there we go. So not too bad. We got 2 of those built. Now we're on to the last bag of bag I, which has a bunch of hardware in it. A couple hinge pins, 2 1mm spacers, 2 2mm spacers, 4 nuts, and 2 little button head screws. So now we're on to step I4. Okay. Now, one thing I'm going to do that's a little different than the manual shows to put the ball stud towards the front of the car. I'm actually going to put the ball stud towards the back of the car. That way it just makes the turnbuckle more straight. But the first thing I'm going to do is get the hub in place. So it has me put a hinge pin in the arm. Let me do this one and see if you guys can see at all as I'm doing it. So I'm going to put the hinge pin in just a little bit. And then it tells me to put the 2mm in the back. And then I'm going to put the hub in. And again, I want the hub that has the ball stud facing rearward. Okay. I'm going to put that in place, get the hole lined up, and I'm going to push that partly in. And then I'm going to put this 1mm ball stud in here from whatever angle works and kind of push so that it doesn't fall. And then you're going to kind of use whatever you can to get in here to line that ball stud washer up and slide the hinge pin the rest of the way in. So you're going to have a 2 in the back, a 1 in the front. That's so you can move the hub forward and backward. Okay. And then you're going to put this little set screw in. Not set screw, but it's a little button head screw in the back of the arm. So in the front, it went on the front. In the back, it goes in the back. And this just, you snug up. Doesn't have to be that tight. It just holds the hinge pin from falling out. And then I'll do this side really quick. Again, it's going to be hinge pin, 2mm spacer, hub, and you don't need to get the drive shaft in place quite yet. You can put that in after the fact. If you want to get it in place, that's fine too. But I kind of slide the washer in while I'm pushing the hub a little bit, so it gives it pressure, and then I can swap and start pushing on the hinge pin itself, and just like so. If you haven't done it before, it will take you a couple tries. You're going to drop things, so make sure you do it over some table or towel that you can get to. Okay. And now I got my rear hubs in place. So the next thing it has you do is put the turnbuckles on. So now I'm going to put the drive shafts into the out drives. And I'm going to grab my 2 rear camber links. And again, these have this stripe on them, notch. It goes all the way around. I always put that to the left of the car, or that would be the United States driver's side. That way all of mine are facing the same way, so that forward is shorter, rearward is longer. And we're just going down. And again, I did not measure these when I put them together. I just kind of eyeballed them and went to town. So you're going to notice that we do sell titanium turnbuckles. A number of companies do, you know, racing spec or even modified. Something I prefer, but they cost more. So, but they're a lot lighter. They're just as strong, or just about. So you're going to see I put those on, and now if you let's do it this way. Now if you look at it, I got a ton at what would be angle up. So just because it's me, I'm actually going to back these off a little bit right now. And I had greased these, so nothing's going to pop off or have a problem. And I'm just going to make it so that the hex is more or less kind of straight up, a little bit, maybe not perfect. But this isn't for me to have a final setting. That's just for me to make it so that it looks better. And then the next thing is to put the shocks on. And again, I'm going to put them with the button head towards the inside and the line that I made facing the front of the car. So this one's going to go over here. And this one's going to go over here. And then I'm just going to start these. Go to my 5.5. Okay, and that's the tops. Sometimes people like to do the bottoms better or first. Now on the bottoms, I'm going to slide them on with the screw out, just so that I know it's not going to interfere with the arm at all. Some people like to do the bottoms first because then they can kind of pull up a little bit more on this and get a little bit more clearance to turn the wrench, so to speak. I have found, for me, I can still get in here and do this by hand, right? Not too bad for me, or I can use the little 5.5 that we sold for the 2-wheel. This comes in really handy for adjusting the slipper on the two wheel or for the front shocks. It's just a little, it's essentially a very, very short 5.5 tool. I'll stuff out of the way again. And for the most part, other than electronics, I have a car. I still got to do the battery setup, but everything spins good. You know, nothing crazy going on. I hear a tiny bit of noise because I don't have the 4 screws in here yet, but not too bad. So now I'm going to go ahead and start on bag J. Let's see here. Never raced on carpet. How hard would it be to set up the DC two-wheel drive four-wheel cars for a carpet instead of buying full cars? So originally, how do I answer this properly? So originally the four-wheel drive was actually meant to be one kit. Until we realized that basically almost everything had to change. So personally, if it were me, I would not enjoy swapping back and forth between the two. I mean, you're talking chassis, drive shafts, drive shaft positioning, hub height, front end parts on the two wheel, shock package, diff oils, diff heights, camber link positions, sway bars. So basically, a carpet car and a dirt car, even though they look pretty similar, steering arms, like probably a lot, like the side guards, a lot of the plastics, different parts. Basically, if I was going to do it, I would have 2 chassis, and then I would have electronics that I pull out of one and put in the other, because the electronics obviously is a really big expense. If you're going to try to swap back and forth, buying all the different parts between them is just as expensive as buying a kit. I mean, heck, the decoupled slipper versus a center diff alone is going to set you back $80-$90 or something like that, right? So to me, I'd buy 4 cars and get the cars set up, and then I'd swap back and forth electronics. I'd make sure all my electronics are on trays, so I just unscrew them and screw them into the next car. The electronics trays, the carbon electronics trays for the 1.0 work in the 2.0. The servo mount from the 1.0 four-wheel drive does work in the 2.0. But yeah, I mean, you're going to gear them different. I mean, gosh, I can't even begin to tell you that the four-wheel drives were so different that that's how we were able to convince the higher ups that we needed to sell 2 cars. Like, it would not, if you bought a DC and you were like, I'm going to go race it on carpet, if you wanted to have the best car you could, if you bought all the parts you needed for it, buying them separately would cost you more than a kit. So to me, I'd buy 2 kits and then swap back and forth electronics if I was on a budget. If you're blessed enough to be in an area that has both a good carpet and a good dirt track. Personally, I don't have a carpet track around here anymore, which is a super bummer. And I can't believe, I mean, 10 years ago, guys, you would have never heard me say this. I actually really, really enjoy 10 scale carpet. I keep trying to convince one of the owners in San Diego to change that track to carpet so that we have a good carpet track in SoCal, because we got a couple other dirt tracks too. And then he would hear people bitch a lot less about how dirt is, and people are very fickle these days. So it's kind of hard to please everybody when you're dealing with dirt. That's why a lot of people are gluing tracks now, which to me isn't real dirt. To me, dirt racing should be on some type of tread, shouldn't be on slicks. But that's just an opinion, right? Everybody's got one of those. So now I'm going to throw away all my bags. This is going to be a little bit different of a bag because I don't have electronics to put in this car. So you're going to kind of see me assemble some stuff, really, but not really. So kind of up to you guys whether you stick around for this bag or not. I kind of mentioned all the important stuff. But some of the things that I also want to, just in case people are going to start bouncing, there's a full tuning part bag. This is all of the different diff height spacers, the front caster adjusting inserts, the shock parts, the sway bar balls, the different pills for moving the hinge pins all over the place, the other parts for mounting different height battery packs in place. I mean, it just a lot of stuff. The other front spindle height spacers are in here. A lot of really, really good stuff. So this bag is super important that you take and you cut all these off the trees and you put them in your parts bag. So you take them to the track so you can tune your car. And then the other thing that we put in the cars is an extra, it's basically just a spare hardware pack. It's got one or two of each of the different pieces of hardware that are in the car. So it's just kind of one of those spare extra goodies. But yeah, so I'm going to jump into what would be bag J now. Even though I don't have all the electronics to put in it. So I'll show you what I can, talk to you about what I know. So the first thing is to note, this now comes with an aluminum, so you can see parts again. This now comes with an aluminum servo horn. It comes with a 25 tooth because it's Spectrum even. We've switched to the 25 tooth, so it'd be more across the board. So if you have something that's not a 25 tooth, well, you're going to have to find a servo horn that works. And then the other thing I want to point out on this is there's one spot in the manual where it shows 3 washers, like 2 on one side, 1 on the other. That's correct. That's all you want. And it comes to this. And then the other thing about this is there's all these different servo spacers. These are really just meant so that you can get the servo. All the servos kind of have a different top size versus where the output shaft is. So you just want to put enough spacers in that you get the, what is essentially the arc of when you're steering. This is going to be up here and then it's going to come down and come down and come down as you steer. So you want to get this so that this is further enough out that you get full throw, right? So anyway, we're still going to put this all together so you guys can see it all. And then the other thing to note is just like the other carbon pieces, there's one side that's chamfered and one part that's flat. So the chamfered part, obviously, it goes up. So first things first, there's 2 different sides to the mount. So you just want to kind of pay attention to the manual. Let's go ahead and separate screws really quick. Little screws, big screws, ball stud. All right, washers, yada, yada, yada. For now, I'm going to take the washers. I'm going to put them in my box in the back just because I'm not putting a servo in. So first things first, I'm going to put the small screws into the mounts. It would be the shorter button head screws here, the M3x6s. And it says to put a little bit of thread lock on here. I'm not going to do that since I don't have a servo, but for what it's worth, put the thread lock in this hole. Don't put it on the screw because most of the carbon will rub it off as you do that. So here's the part. It goes this direction with the chamfer up. This goes here. So this will be the first one. And again, I'm going to start this with my, like so. And all of the screw lengths are really important because if I used too long a screw here, right? Oh, sorry. The reason all the screws are so specific is because that hole is the next hole I need to use, right? So if the screw was too long, it'd get into that hole. So anyway, there's that. You can see in the manual, it'll kind of be this direction. I'm just trying to make it so that it's 90 degrees there. Hey, my cat looks like it wants out, which is about right for while I'm doing a video. Okay, so now I've got, that's my first step, right? And then from there, I would take it and I'd put the servo on, and that's these 4 other screws. So there's one washer up top into this one. Okay. This lower one has no washer, and there's a reason for it, in that it would get in the way of what you're installing it into the car. And then this side, both of these have a washer. Okay. Hold on, let me let my cat out. I'm sorry, guys. All right. So I'm just going to set those in there. Obviously, you'd have a servo in place and you'd tighten it all. And then this would go on the servo, right, with this little screw. Okay, which I'm going to take and put in here right now. I am going to put the ball stud in here. And this I am going to use a little bit of thread lock on. This you can put it directly. I'm going to just get it right out of the base here because some came out. And this goes on, so you can see it goes on this direction, which is essentially kind of servo is going to be over here and the ball stud's going to be this way. Okay, I'll put this on. You're obviously going to center your servo. This is going to be straight up and down. And then this is a clamping servo horn. So there's a little screw that goes in here. This usually provides enough pressure. You don't want to put thread lock on this one. Okay. And then the next step has you actually installing the servo in. Okay. So this goes in. Again, you can use the old 1.0 mount here if you want. The longer screw is the one that goes through the side guard. The shorter screw is the one that comes through the chassis. So I'm going to do the side guard one first. I haven't had to use any thread lock on these before. Like I've never had this come loose. And then I'm going to put this on the inner one. And again, there's a little post that keys in, and then you put the screw behind it. Okay, so that's in there. Now I can kind of finish tightening up this side. I'm not going to go too crazy because whoever ends up with this car. Okay, and then again, line to the left. I'm going to go ahead and put this in place so that it doesn't get lost, more or less. And then this would be this way. So this needs to come in that direction. Okay. And then like so, right? And then as things steer, we're good to go. Now this, I did not do the length of this. The length is pretty darn important on this one too. And it's supposed to be 23.1 millimeters between the two parts here. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that really quick because I don't want to be that guy if I hand this off to somebody and they're like, my car doesn't work right. Yeah, because we're at like 27 and some change right now, which is way too much. So I'm just going to go ahead and screw this in a whole bunch. Double check, let's see where we're at now. Okay, 23.8. So that should be about 23.2, a little bit more. I'm at 23.16 right now, which is pretty darn close. So now that's to the proper length. Wasn't too bad. Normally, if there's a servo in there, I can just sit here and do it, and I don't have to hold on to anything and do it, but it's not so bad. And then the 2 bag is next. which is the fan mounts, and the motor mount. Again, I don't have a motor, so we're not gonna do that. But you've got the fan mount that goes right over the motor. You got the other fan mount that can go behind. Actually, you'll be able to see it better once I ate myself. So let's do that first. All right, here we go. Fan mount that goes behind. I always put this one on. So this one I'm going to take and I'm going to put in the box. Whoever gets this can deal with however I did it. So then normally you'd have 2 screws, 2 screws, 2 screws. And these are M3 by 10s. Okay, and these are M3 by 12s. These, you put the 1mm washer on them, 1mm washer. Now, normally you'd put your motor on here, and there's a side that has the flatheads that fit in it exactly, right? So this screw is what's to hold your motor. So I don't have that right now, so those screws can go in the box. But I'm going to put this in place just so I don't misplace it, because it's a pretty important part. And it is going to slide in, right, so that it keys. Obviously the motor will be back here, but now it can slide in and out, right? And then the 2 screws go in. Okay, you can see I left them a little loose. This would make it so that this can slide in and out to adjust your gear mesh, right? And that's how you take the motor in and out as well. I'm just gonna give them a tiny little snugging so that it's not falling all over the place. And that's step J3. We also have new spur gears that we're working on, guys, for some spec racing. Let me set all these out. Okay, the next thing you would do is usually what I'll do is I'll put this in place and then I'll screw my fan on. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. This goes, so normally your motor would be right here, right? And then this is here, positioned directly over your motor, and you can slide it in and out with the motor. And the fan screws are the really long ones, okay? And you only need really 2 of those in place, but we give you 4. But I'm going to go ahead and this is okay. One little hint I'll give you, something I kind of figured out through all my testing. The way that the kit body is, comes down so quick that you can't run the fan out. You got to run the fan in. Okay, so put that in. Okay, and then your fan would essentially sit on top of here, and then you'd screw it in place. I'm going to put these screws here so that they don't get lost. Okay, and then the other little itty bitty screw, that would be, this is if you're going to use the rearward fan mount. Okay, so I don't need that screw right now either. And then J3, this is actually kind of an interesting, there's all kinds of parts to this, guys. So just, I'll show a bunch of this, but you don't necessarily get to build this directly as the manual says. So I mention it that way. The idea is we give you enough stuff here that you can adjust it for the different thickness, different length, different everything battery packs that are out there. Everybody says one thing and it might be a little different or whatnot. They might be a little taller, they might be a little shorter, blah, 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 blah. You know, it is what it is. So we give you all the stuff to adjust it. So you can see there's thin pack and thick pack spacers. There's all these different fore aft spacers, and there's even more in the other pack. But I'm just going to assemble all this like the manual is, and then we'll go from there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this on. This goes here, okay? But the little spacers back here, right? So you might have this big long spacer back here, okay? So you need to make sure that you leave enough room there. So if you put it all the way back, the spacer's not going to work. So you got to kind of put that spacer in place and then stick this on. And again, you might have some packs. We give this to you because some packs are narrower. So you may or may not use this. So I would kind of have your battery pack handy. But now that's stuck in place. Nothing too crazy. This is for a spec car. I'm still going to put the shorty mounts in it. Get all the screws situated. There's a bunch of washers and everything in here. So first things first, let me screw these little things in. We show putting a number 2 block in the back, okay, and the number 1 block up front. Personally, my personal car, I have a number 1 block fore and aft for the Trinity batteries. So that's what I'm going to put in here. And this is going to use these little itty bitty shorty button heads. And again, you're literally just pulling spacers in here. So you don't got to go too crazy tightening these. This is just so these spacers are made not only to hold your battery, but so that you can move your battery fore and aft and all kinds of fun stuff there. Okay, so that's kind of the first step. And then the next step, I'm going to put, again, the short ones in. So these just push into these squares here. If you use a taller battery, you're going to use the taller ones. But for now, I'm not using this. I'm not using the taller battery. So those are just going to go in there. Now I can screw the bottom screws in. These use the little flathead screws. So now this holds the rest of the side guard on finally. Which is nice. I love this part. It finally feels nice and tight. Okay. And now you've got these. Okay. And again, like everything else, there's a sharper side. Well, no, just kidding. These we actually do both sides, which is nice. I appreciate that. Now you have 0.5, 1 millimeter, and 2 millimeter shims. Okay. And the purpose of all these different shims is you set your battery pack in here and you put this, and you want this to be flat against your battery. You don't want it to be all canted up, and you don't want it so that your battery can flop up and down, right? So that's what these are for. You're only probably going to need one of the 3. Okay. Personally, so that these don't get lost from this car, I'm going to put a 1/2, a 1, and a 2 on each one of these, which you'll never need that many. No batteries are legally even that thick. And I'm going to put this in place. And this I always just snug up, and I always use the hand driver when it comes to putting my batteries in and out. New spur gears for spec racing. Not a new material, they're smaller. So the new motors we find are super duper torquey. So we needed smaller spur gears. So for the diff for clay, the smallest we found we needed was 75. So we're making a 75. Well, we made it. It's just not out yet. It'll be out in about 2 to 3 months, hopefully. They've all been tested now and ordered. You just got to wait for them to get here. And then for the decoupled slipper, which is a slipper and the decoupled slipper, which is what you use on carpet, people like to gear up even higher. So that we made a 72 for that. So those will be out soon. So there's that step. And again, have your battery handy to do it. From here, it shows putting your receiver in and your speed control in with double-sided tape. Receiver goes here, speed control goes on this side. Again, all the holes are here for using the electronics plates, the carbon electronics plates. So if you have those from your 1.0 or you have some spares, you can use those in here. I like to use them because there's 3 different length chassis now. So if I'm going to change the chassis, I can just go whoop, and all my electronics are gone. Or if I'm changing from dirt to carpet, everything comes out and goes right into my carpet car or vice versa. So yeah. So then this next part is kind of wire management for all that stuff. There is a antenna mount. I haven't seen anybody need to use this in I don't know how long, but then you have the set screw for it for the antenna tube that goes in here. That would keep the antenna tube in place, right? Antenna tube here, set screw would keep it in place after that. And then you just screw it into the middle of the car here. It goes over here. Again, I haven't seen anybody use one of these in ages. But it just goes in right over here because most people in their electric cars just use an antenna-less receiver now. That goes in the box. And then the last thing is this part here. You're going to see there's a square side and a radius side. The squared off side is what goes down towards this. And this is just for wire routing. This is what your ESC wires, your positive wire or negative wire, depending on how you run yours, comes through. And this is into composite. But if you screw it too tight, you're going to mangle the top of it. So now you have a place for your wires here. This little hole under here is for your receiver wire to come. Your speed control wire comes under there and into your receiver. And then this would be your one wire that comes across your 2 wires here to your positive and negative of your battery. Okay. And then the next pack is the final pack of assembly. Okay. So you get some Velcro. You get hook and loop. Sorry, I'm not supposed to call it Velcro. You get hook and loop. I always recommend putting the hook side on the car because it's going to last a lot longer than the loop. The loop is what I put on the body. And I put all these in place and then I kind of peel them back a little bit and hit it with a little bit of super glue so that they stay. So, but that's your call. Kind of one of those numbers, put those in there. And then the last bits are your wing mount and your wheel nuts and body pins, which are useless. And like your wing is right here. It's the 7-inch Proline wing. It's got 3 dimples, so you can run it fore, middle, aft. It's the same spacing. It's the same wing as we give you with the 22X. And you got this shim so that it's an angle shim, 0 on one side, 4 on the other. Whichever way is kind of pointing forward. This is the DC, so we have the 4 up with the small or shallow forward. That way it angles the wing 4 millimeters. And then this goes, you can see that there's a side that's got recesses. That goes down. That's meant to, so that this doesn't move around once you get it all together. I'm just going to put this in place. And then from there, you get front and rear wheel nuts. The rear wheel nuts are the wider ones. Obviously, they're all serrated. They're all aluminum. Even the front ones are really nice serrated aluminum wheel nut. I'd get them on there. Make sure you get them all the way on there. You don't want to lose these. It's kind of crazy how expensive these serrated thin aluminum ones are. And there we go. Okay, so now I can throw away those bags, which is it, guys. So I'll give it about a minute or two. If anybody's got any other questions, feel free to ask. What is the thickness of the battery tabs? Looks like 3 millimeters. It's the same that the Elite had. So, and I can measure them. I think they're 3 mil. No, 2.5, which is what we've always used. Never been a problem. I've never had a battery eject or anything. But yeah, that's the new DC. So you got a little bit longer chassis. You got bigger diff cups. You got adjustable height diffs. You got a whole new sway bar setup that everybody can get right. You got adjustable caster blocks. You got 13 millimeter shocks. You got new gull wing front arms, a new -2 rear tower. And the rest of it's pretty similar to the 1.0, I guess. But quite a few things that it comes with. It's definitely got a different setup on it. Same shock bodies as the 22X. So if you want to build it with the Kashima bodies right off the bat, you can get those. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't see any other questions really here. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this. Let's see, the pistons for front and rear have the same part number, and the blanks are also part number. Is this how that is supposed to be? Yes. The 13 millimeter 2.3 thickness pistons are a blank. That's how we sell them. So that's the part number I have to use. But it's a 2x17, 2x18 piston that are in the car. And there are thick piston versus the 22X 2-wheel having thin pistons. We have found as we've run more 13 millimeter stuff, we tend to like the 2.3s better. I've even had some people like the 2.5s, and from some of the manufacturers, mainly on carpet, I think. But yeah, it's almost like we're having to use the thickness to make up for the extra volume, because it's honestly, for this size car and the weight of the car, 13 millimeters feels really plush, but getting the right balance is a bit hard. And there is no tie ball stud 5.8 by 10 millimeter offered. There should be. If there isn't, that's my fault. I got samples of them. Let's see here. Let's see if I can find them. Eight, 10. Yes. Yeah, I made them. Whew. I got worried for a second. They are TLR-1314. So, yes, there's a 10 millimeter available now. And it's nice to have the 10 millimeter. We probably should have just made those when we made the 22X, the 2-wheel. But they were absolutely necessary for the 4-wheel. So now we have 10 millimeter length of both the steel and the titanium ball studs. So, yeah. All right. Well, if anybody has any other questions when this is over or whatnot, or you just need some help, something didn't make sense to you, always feel free to reach out to me, message me directly. I'm always happy to help, guys. But other than that, God bless. Take care. And for those of you out there that are on our team or just want to be a good guy, always make sure to help out the new folks at the track, regardless of what they're running. Help them out any way you can. So the more folks that stay in our hobby and grow, the better off it is for all of us. So take care and